Good evening. My apologies for a couple of minutes off our scheduled 6:30 start. Tonight, we have a presentation for City Council Informational by Norwich Community Development President Kevin Brown, and Scott Lassard from Leading Edge Grant Consultants is with us as well concerning our next CIF or Community Investment Fund application. Thank you for joining us. Please go right ahead. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, everybody. Kevin Brown, President, NCDC, 66 Franklin Street. Thanks for the time to introduce to you the idea of this waterfront revitalization grant application that we're going to make to the CIF committee. It's old news because you know and approved previously a resolution for us to pursue the same. And when I say us, really, like literally us, there are many different folks who have different pieces and parts of this application. But as you recall, at the time that we submitted the last application, we were in the middle of trying to determine whether or not there would be a new owner and operator at the marina. Ladies and gentlemen, they're here. Physically, Brittany Dwyer is with us in the room this evening. And so that puts us in better stead going back to the CIF committee, because one of the things that they had expressed concern about in the executive summary of our last grant application was the uncertainty that was wrapped around having a true blue marina operator. So that cuts both ways. Before, most of us, and certainly the Dwyers, were sort of flying blind. We just knew that we wanted to seize the opportunity to take this downtown asset and do something with it. And I've been in many conversations with all of you about ways that we could do that. Now that the Dwyers are on the scene, and now that the Dwyers are able to do diligence on the assets at the marina, the process of discovery is creating quite a bill to get that done. But that's the purpose of the Community Investment Fund grant. It's to slingshot distressed communities into the future. No one's ever explained to me that CIF 2030, no one's ever explained to me what the 2030 part of that means. But I think we can all assume they're trying to set up the 50 most distressed municipalities in the state in a new place by year 2030. 5 years of grant applications and funding streams helps us do things like what we're going to talk about here tonight. So that was all to stage you for the fact that this is not the last grant application. It's new, different, and modified. And let me just acknowledge up front that some of you will see some things that are going to feel a little bit new or unstaffed. That's why we're here having this conversation. Probably the most important thing I'd like to point out in that regard is that the resolution that is on your published agenda for this evening has a not to exceed of about $8.139 million for this grant application. You're going to see in a minute, I'm going to show you $11.7 million worth of grant requests of the state of Connecticut. If ultimately you decide you want to direct us to go back and figure out where to deselect or a la carte what it is that we really pursue, then that's exactly what we'll do. Obviously, my optimistic ask is that you'll acknowledge that this is an opportunity for the city to go to the state of Connecticut and get funding that'll make us healthy and not have a half-baked solution for what we're trying to do at the marina. So there you have it. So let's go ahead and get into the presentation. So you're going to see this arc that you see on the screen as I go through this thing, and it's just sort of a story arc that says that what we're trying to do here is we're trying to connect all these things. And the Heritage Trail is a spine for that, and the waterfront is a spine for that. And each and every one of these location markers on the slide are different projects that, as I said earlier, are already underway or even in some cases complete, but they all tie together. This CIF grant application, if I can leave you with one thing, this is an attempt to tell the state of Connecticut we are synthesizing our efforts here in the city with all of the ARP spending that we've done, with the bonding that's been done, with the Norwich Revitalization Program monies that have been rolled out. We want to plug all that together, and this application is a chance to do that. So it's an informed decision. You can see a list of things that this application is consistent with. Right up front, it's consistent with the waterfront vision in the most recent harbor management plan. It's consistent with the findings of the city's master park plan, which I'm sort of unveiling a little bit to you ahead of time. It will be coming before the council for review and approval, probably publishing in January. But in talking to Kate Mildy, the things that we're proposing here tonight fit within what the city's master parks plan is envisioning. It's consistent with the preliminary findings of the Chelsea District and Downtown Norwich Mobility Study that is currently underway, commissioned by Pat and his team in Public Works. Preliminary findings because that report also won't be fully published and on the street until next spring. But we've been able to talk to Jim Butler and the folks that are involved in that study and get some initial things aligned with what we're doing. It's consistent with public sentiment that's been gathered on the Envision 360 site about the kinds of things that folks want to see. And you know, look, in some cases, none of it's a surprise, right? People want to see a year-round restaurant. People want to see public-facing space, activity, and access at the marina. And people don't want to see a blighted pink building sitting there at the entrance to the marina. So the things that we're proposing are all consistent with those types of public sentiment. And then just the steady public demand that we all hear about an active waterfront. It's consistent with the economic development goals for the city because this will in fact induce employment at the marina, and it will induce second-order economic effect from the either local visitation or regional tourism that comes from a new, enhanced, and capable marina that has new docks and piers. And then finally, it's consistent with this body's identification of the marina as the most important asset to revitalize our downtown when you had your visioning exercise or your goal-setting exercise back in February of 2022. If you recall, the marina, you know, rose to the top of the list. So here we are with this CIF grant and trying to pursue exactly that. Just one call out on the harbor management plan. As you see there, this is just an extract, and it says public access should be considered as physical and or visual access to the harbor management area available to all members of the general public and not limited to any particular group or individuals. And I highlighted that because I want everyone to understand that we want to make sure we keep in mind the intent of the Community Investment Fund program. It's economic, and I go back to the very first slide here real quick. It's economic development and community access. Those are the two main levers that we got to pull if we're doing this thing right. So I call that out for you from the harbor management plan. And then as I said, the city's goal setting meeting in February of 2022, you know, the time horizon and the cost of the thing we're talking about tonight was identified as clearly limiting, tough to do. Where were we going to get the significant amounts of dollars to do the kinds of things we're talking about tonight? When you all met and had this goal-setting session, there was not something called the Community Investment Fund 2030 grant process with the state of Connecticut. And again, just to reiterate, it's intended to slingshot distressed communities like Norwich, Connecticut. It showed up on the scene to fill in that yellow bubble down there at the bottom. Okay, the arc, right? As I said, it's just sort of the storyline that will be repeated as we go through this thing, but here's what it looks like on a map. So the three highlighted boxes are the three prime components of this Community Investment Fund grant application. Heritage Trail improvements, the American Wharf Marina enhancements and improvements, and some Howard T. Brown Park improvements. And we'll talk about each one of those individually as we proceed. But on this map, I wanted to take that arc, that story arc, and lay it out and say, look, we have as a city put $2.8 million in ARP funding into Uncas Leap to create a heritage park. We have, as a city, a Norwich Public Utilities sewage treatment plant upgrade of $200 million that's underway, and over the next 5 years will dramatically change the quality of the water in and around this waterfront that we're talking about. The point of having those on this map and talking about it is to, again, synthesize this whole story about the change that's taking place and that we want to be dovetailed all together. 2, 3, and 4, I said I'll talk about them, and then at the far end you see at the bottom other heritage trail extensions and the Shetucket Salvage Yard. Those are not included in this CIF grant application, but I wanted to point at them as the next round, the things that could come if in fact we can achieve in getting the funding for the things we're going to go after here in this application. When you look at it on the map, the story arc, it comes to life. You have local neighborhoods that can all access that improved heritage trail. You have people that can come to the marina dock their boat and access the Heritage Trail up to a new Heritage Park at Uncas Leap. It's really just telling that whole story is what we're trying to do with this particular application. Okay, here it is. This is the not $8.2 million slide that I talked about. So in the aggregate, all things considered, investments by our private partner, investments by the municipality in work that's already underway at Howard T. Brown Park, investments in ARP that you committed to in the last few weeks to move the ball down at the marina. All of those things, $14.5 million. Collectively, the public-private match between the city and the private investments is another 2.7, and then other state match. I called out the SHIP grants, the Small Harbor Improvement Program grants, because when we turn this into the CIF committee, they will not count that as a match necessarily since it's state funding anyway, but in the aggregate for what we're doing, it's another investment in this forward progress that we're creating. And I'll go through each of these again, like I said, individually. Okay, I don't need to spend a lot of time here. This is all known information, but at the north end of this entire story arc, story arc that we're drawing, you have a funded Heritage Park project and a funded sewage treatment plant. Inside of Heritage Trail, and a lot of what I'm showing you tonight, I'm showing it to you for a couple reasons. One, some of the granularity and fidelity of the actual things that are happening, but also to show you that in many cases now, we have design documents or at least conceptual diagrams. And frankly, the last time we turned this application in, we didn't have any of that. We didn't have an owner who, by the way, has aggressively pursued architects and marine engineers, probably to the point where they're tired of hearing from them, and produced actual CDs for us to estimate costs. We're in a whole different space this time. So as you see these slides come by, you're going to see some images that really, again, are just intended to show you that work is underway. On the Heritage Trail, where you see the pink lines, that's where the concept is to widen the paved portion of the path to 10 feet. Where you see dashed green lines, that's where pavers are going to be introduced. And where you see the solid green line down at Howard T. Brown Park, that's where pavers are going to be replaced. Those are some of the bigger moving parts. As I said, there's a connection to a site out here that provides an overlook to Yantic Falls and the park. And so some improvements and some easement acquisition dollars are included on that component part. And then, as I said earlier, the second portion, the pedestrian-friendly connection to the heart of downtown, we're not there yet. That's not going to occur in this round. I have initiated conversations with Jeff and Catherine Lord, and they're just not really sure that they're prepared for that yet. So I want the rest of what we do to compel them and demonstrate to them that the best next step for this city is to be able to walk from Howard T. Brown Park to the downtown to Franklin Square, where 17 market rate apartments that are already being funded by CIF are going to be built out in the Reed and Hughes building, and further down the road, 42 market rate apartments are being built out thanks to an ARP investment that this body made. We're trying to tie it all together. That's what the Howard T. Brown Park is about. In addition, from the harbor management plan, there is this crumbling concrete spill pipe area that, with just a very few dollars, could create a contemplative spot along the Yantic River on your way up to Uncas Leap. So just another small improvement and an easy lift inside of this overall ask. So for the Heritage Trail portion, the total project budget is $754,000. There's already been a commitment by the city to match that municipally with $135,000, making the CIF round 4 request to the state $619,500. On the wharf, this is a combination of the Dwyer's year 1, 2, year 3, and year 5 long-term plan, and our best attempt to put that into a picture. So if you like it, we'll give it to you. If you don't, we'll fix it. As you go through the phased pictures, years 1 and 2, repairing and refreshing all over the property has already begun, and that is the immediate and first step. To include, importantly, code correction of a lot of the electrical and plumbing problems that exist on all of the docks and all of the slips. The Dwyers have already committed to furnishing and installing a new event tent. Brings back memories of old for folks. And the commitment to furnish and install above-ground fuel tanks, that being nested inside of the CIF grant request. And then finally, and most importantly and most expensive, is the replacement of docks C and D. So if you walk your way across the top here, current state of being is the first diagram. The second diagram shows yellowed buildings. That's the restaurant and the club and the pad that are currently undergoing improvements and will continue to based on private investments, the ARP tranche that you all committed to it, and then potentially future CIF dollars that would come. The next diagram over, you see the fuel tank up here in the upper portion, and you notably see docks C and D missing. Because again, just to make a point and make this crystal clear to everybody, the big moving part of this entire application is the acknowledgement that docks C and D were put in about the time that guy was the mayor of Norwich, Connecticut, and they're at the end of their useful life. And Race Engineering and Bellingham Marine Engineering have both taken a look at it. They've made their initial assessments, and they've likened it to projects they've done in Norwalk and Bridgeport, where this same condition is happening all up and down the coast, where folks got into these concrete docks when they first hit the market, and they were the thing to have, and they're reaching the end of their useful life. And we'll talk dollars here in a second. You go down to phase 2, you see the replacement of those docks, and some work on the clubhouse. And then in the last diagram, you see this thing right here. It's hard to see probably from where you sit, and that's okay, because it's really just meant to be a representative green space. Because one of the other aspects of what we're asking for from the CIF committee is very simply $250,000 in planning monies to envision what it could be if the Marina Towers was taken down and that space was used for another different purpose, be it economic development, public access, or otherwise. I make that distinction because in the rules for the Community Investment Fund grant process, there used to only be two sub-component parts of the program. One was capital improvements, and the other was small business development. Those were the two ways that you could apply for specific monies. The last round, they added a third component part, and it is simply planning and development, and it has a cap of $250,000. In fact, probably a good time to just note that Deanna and her team are also turning an application, and you'll vote on a resolution here tonight for it as well, to do exactly that for the Norwich side of the state hospital property. And the idea is that you take these $250,000 planning grants and you actually do the studies to figure out what the right highest and best use is for a parcel before you start asking the committee for the money to take a building down or do demolition or do remediation or build a park. So inside of this ask for that particular component part where that green space is, don't get hung up on the green color or the green space or the trails. They're not to scale. They're not even real. It's just intended to show that the ugly pink building disappears. That's what that's all about. As I said earlier, these diagrams are just to show you what I'm trying to tell you, and that is that the Dwyers are busy and underway with architects and engineers. And I didn't draw these things in PowerPoint. These are real architectural drawings by professionals as they undertake the hard work of getting the place turned around. And remember too, right, this back to your goal setting session in February of 2022 and the identification of this space as critically important for revitalization of the city as a whole, this creates opportunities for enhanced visitation, whether it is people coming in boats up the river or people who want to come and go to the restaurant or come and have a wedding on the pad in the new festival tent or the ultimate permanent structure that the Dwyers envision years down the road as they get underway. So that's an economic impact. There's the obvious economic impact of a full four-season restaurant having 30 or 40 service jobs that are reliable and renewable, and not just a who's going to run the restaurant next condition, the way we've been operating lately. And then the event attraction could be private events, but it could also be public events coordinated with the city. And then finally, and simply, it's an improvement over the blighted conditions of what it looks like right now. So this is where the large-scale costs come in, obviously. To completely remove and replace these, did I say end of life? To completely remove and replace these end-of-life docks and piers, you're talking in the neighborhood of $3.25 million. Then there are the repairs and rehabilitation required for the other docks, A, B, I forget, F and G, E, F and G, A, B, E, F and G, yeah, as you go around So the public-private match altogether between ARP, the investments of the private owner-operator is 2.4, leaving a CIF round 4 ask of approximately $7.8 million. Now we get to Howard T. Brown Park. The good news here is back in June of last year, when we submitted a CIF round 3 application to improve and enhance the waterfront, there was no work underway yet. In fact, all we had, I think, if I have this right, all we had was responses to the RFP and estimates that came in about $800,000 over what we thought the bid would be. We had a couple of SHIP grants and a municipal match. We thought we collectively be paying $1,041,000 to get all of this work done. Turns out that's about $800,000 short. So in the round 3 application, we simply asked for that gap funding. And what that gap funding was at that time intended to do, and in fact would be doing this time, is this part. Not sure how well you can see it on the imagery, but it's the public dock right by the boat launch. Was eliminated. Am I correct? Yeah, was eliminated. And so in this grant, we're putting in for that wedge to be able to go back after that and do that work right there for that part of the public dock. Additionally, this is an extract from the yet-to-be-published, unveiled right here for the first time ever, the yet-to-be-published Park Master Plan. And you can see on it there are a number of things identified. We sort of a la carte chose off of this a requirement for or a request for a permanent stage facility. It's called a pavilion in our current construct of our grant, but we'll make that modification, call it a permanent stage. And one other component part. Yeah, bathroom, a restroom. I've sat in this room and heard folks come to this podium and say time and again, we need a public restroom in an area where we want the public to come and be. And so we've added a public restroom to this estimate as well. Thank you. And then this is where it really gets crazy. So I had a couple extra minutes, and I thought to myself, all right, look, we are asking the state of Connecticut for an awful lot of money. And we're asking for it for all the right reasons, because we have a blighted, end-of-life marina that is not fully operationally capable from an economic development and regional tourism standpoint. And that's great. But this is also supposed to go back to, I'm not going to go to it, but go all the way back to the harbor management plan goal that this waterfront has to be accessible either physically or at least visually by everybody in this community. And so it's cool if we can let people look out and go, oh, wow, we got nice boats on the water at our marina, we're winning. But if they're not getting on those boats, they don't feel like they're winning. So this is an attempt to use the space just above the ice cream shop to emplace a combination splash pad / ice rink. We're in touch with the vendor. They construct these things. It comes with a chiller, and we've estimated that cost out and put it into the conceptual approach to this thing. I've already felt a little bit of a rumble in the room from the minute I walked in till right now. If this ultimately has to be deselected out, I would need to be told that, but I think that it's a good idea. I think that it's the way that we reach out and meet some of the public demands that we've heard here for so long. Even if even if the park master plan suggests other splash pads in other locations in the city. This is our downtown. Go all the way back to the goal-setting session, February 2022. We all saw it as the place that needed to be revitalized. This is life. This is public access. This is an improvement. And it's a bit of a flyer, I'll admit. And so overall, the total project budget for the Howard T. Brown Park improvements is $3.2 million with the same municipal small harbor improvement program aggregate match that I described earlier, leaving a CIF round 4 request of $2.17 million for that component part. And then finally, I've caveated this a couple times. This is just part of the visioning, right? You know, you walk that whole arc, and man, wouldn't it be great if one day you could actually walk under the Water Street Bridge and into the center of our downtown, especially if you live here, where we're putting, private, public partnership monies, $6+ million into building out Reed and Hughes affordable housing and market rate housing, and 42 units over here with an investment of about $8.8 million, where 42 market rate apartments would be. I want to live here if I can get on a sidewalk and walk pedestrian access down to Howard T. Brown Park and have an ice cream and go on the splash pad. Okay, that's what we have. Just a reminder, we stand here tonight on December the 4th, and we have to turn in the grant on December 15th, and we're endeavoring to have a final draft fully put together no later than December 12th, so that we can kind of go one last round and make sure that everything is copacetic with everybody. In closing, I'd just like to thank all of the folks whose material I stole. I don't own the marina. I don't run Public Works. I don't run Plans and Neighborhood Services. I don't run the Harbor Commission. All of those folks have really provided the initiatives and the impetus and the forward progress to put all this together and ask for the funding to make it become special instead of have it just limp along. And so without all of the folks who have already been doing all that, we wouldn't be able to have this conversation here tonight. And I promise this isn't because I just wheeled around and saw him sitting there. I was going to say it anyway, but I'd also like to thank our delegation representatives who, at the end of this whole conversation, when the CIF committee makes executive summaries of everything I just told you, and it's 1 page long, and it gets shipped out to all the people on the committee, and it's got to tell the whole story about what we're trying to say. It's Darrell and Kevin Ryan, Doug Dubitsky, and Kathy Austin who are going to be up there holding the line for us and making it clear why this is important and helps move our community. Subject to your questions, that's all I have.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Mrs. Dwyer, particularly your family, for believing and investing in our city and being part of this ultimate vision. And Kevin, in particular, thank you for the way you've wrapped it together so that everyone can actually see what's taking place in total. Some people call that a 30,000-foot view, but it's much more than that. I think all of us can envision ourselves being part of this when it's complete. I also want to thank the current council, because all of you had a part in this, and I want you to know that you have pride in that. You believed in it, you saw in it, and you felt it was important enough to invest in it, where we had the opportunity to do so. So thank you very much. Members of council, questions? Please, Pro Tem, please.
Kevin, thank you very much for your presentation. And we've had this conversation in the past. So this grant submission creates the nodes, right? Okay, it really, so starting with the transportation center, then the marina, and Howard T. Brown Park, really the Market Street garage, and then the connection, you know, from there, the natural transition into the downtown area as a walkable space. How do we, and I would love to see every single element of this happen. My question is, what do we then do If we are successful, what do we then do to create the connectivity, right? To daisy chain those things together in a meaningful way so that the community can access it. I like the idea of the splash pad, even though tonight is the first time I'm seeing that. I love it. But then I wonder, okay, if I'm a parent with kids that live in the downtown area, how do they get across all of that traffic, right, to the
Yeah.
splash pad, right? I mean, and that's just one issue, you know, one of the issues. Not that we shouldn't do it,
Right.
but how do we facilitate it, right?
Yeah. No, all I can say, President Pro Tem, is I'm in violent agreement with you, right? Let's win this, have a high five, but in the meantime, start planning forward in the next round. And I'll tell you, you may have kind of helped inspire more work for Scott, because what the CIF committee wants us to do, they've told us this every time. When we turn in one of these grants, they want to hear the rest of the story. They want us to identify, like I've only identified for you the what if, or the potential of if we could ever get the extension of the Heritage Walk under the Water Street Bridge. But what we probably need to make sure we do is talk about these other things that if I just say it in the vernacular, we're coming back at you in round 7, and we want to get a crosswalk, or we want to do or we want to leverage the ongoing mobility study to say, based on what we are doing and the results of that mobility study, it is clear that we need to do, and I'm not going to fill in this blank because I'm not a traffic engineer, we need to do blank at the intersection of Chelsea Harbor and Water Street. And that blank isn't just about moving cars, it's about moving people. So I think we probably already have set ourselves up to talk to it in the grant we're referencing the mobility study, but it's preliminary results only, so it won't really carry the weight. We will have to move to that next step that you're talking about.
And just to add on to that, I mean, and these are issues and questions that are being addressed in the mobility study as well. So, but you know, these are the kinds of projects. They're not sexy, right? But they're necessary,
Yeah.
right? They have to happen.
Right, right. And you know, the fallback that I have for you, and I didn't want to start here, is until and unless we can get to the point of having a more sophisticated pedestrian network to deliver people on foot down into there, at least we have the heritage trail spine, right? So people can come off of, you know, the neighborhoods off of Washington Street and get on the heritage trail and walk down there or bike down there. So we've got that going for us. And then the other fallback is, in the meantime, folks will park and they'll have an ice cream and they'll go to Splash Pad and then they'll get back in the car and they'll drive out. In fact, we actually joked about this today. Somebody on the team said, well, what if the parking lot gets full of people going to the Splash Pad? I said, good. That's a good problem to have. I mean, we have some very real traffic things to consider if we get to that point, but hope, a little bit of hope.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions at this time? Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you.
Appreciate all the extensive work.
Have a good evening.